Okay, cool. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so here is what I'm gonna do. I found some reference images and I'm just gonna put them in the chat box here so you guys can all have access to them. Okay, that's the reference image we'll be using. Let me just save this scene. Let's create a new scene. So the first thing we're gonna do is we obviously wanna import the reference images. And the way you do that is relatively simple. You can either go add and then click the image reference, or Shift A is the shortcut for add and then select the reference image. Shoot. Give me one moment. I think Blender just glitched out. Anyways, Shift A, add the reference image. So there we go. Now we have the reference image in the scene. What we want to do is set up so they're perpendicular. We want to have two of them, one for the front view, one for the side, which is what we have here. So what we want to do is set them up so that they're facing the right way. RX 90 degrees. So we can make this one face be the side view. Then we can duplicate it using Shift D for duplicate, and then we can rotate it 90 degrees, and we can use that for the front view. Okay. Next thing, for setting up the reference images, you kind of want the front view to be like intersecting the side view, and what I mean is that, say that this is the side view, then when you look over here for the front view, you want the front view image to be intersecting the side view like that, so that if you switch this way, you see the front, and if you switch this way, you get an accurate dimension for the side. Let me just move this back a little bit. Okay, like this. And so what we can now set up now that we have set up the reference images, we can start modeling. I usually like to start out with a sphere. I mean, not a sphere, a cube, because it's easy to manipulate and it's easy to mirror across. The way we'll be doing the modeling is that we'll be splitting the cube in half, and so we'll model half of the elephant, and then we'll use the mirror modifier to duplicate mirror the half, so that we only have to do half of the work. And so now that we have a cube here, what I usually like to do is to use a loop cut down in the middle, or the shorthand is Control R for adding a loop cut down the middle, and then we can delete all of the faces on this side. Select these faces and just hit X, delete face. Now that we have half of a cube, we can go mirror it across this image plane. Or mirror it across. You also want to make sure you enable clipping, and what that does is, let me just hide the image. If you see without clipping, if you tap into edit mode, you can move these two cubes apart, but if you enable clipping, they're now glued together. And so what we want to do is to enable clipping so that the mesh doesn't accidentally become separate, and that'll be very hard to fix in the latter stages. Let me bring the reference image back. Okay, so now that we have a basic cube set up, an easy way is to go enable X-ray mode. That will allow the cube to be transparent. Let's just move the cube here. And so basically what we want to do for now is to just use the cube and extrude to make an outline, to outline the elephant. Select this face, we can hit E to extrude. What we want to do is just use the cube to make an outline of the elephant. E to extrude again, bring it over here. Select the top few faces, E to extrude, bring it up. Change between vertice, edge, and face mode freely. This way, it'll make it easier to manipulate all of the tiny details. Do this. Let's extrude these two faces. Oops. Face mode. Let's extrude these two faces. Extrude again. Okay. This is all. This is just a basic setup for the elephant. Cool. So now that we have the basic outline of the elephant, what we want to do next is to kind of just align up the front face as well. So now we have the side view lined up. We also wanted to line it up with the front face. So with that we will need let's select this entire edge, and then just bring it out. GY, bring it out this way. Move it down a little bit. And then we also want to move this entire edge down. GZ, bring it down. Let me just move this reference image up a little bit. And to the right. There we go. So some shortcut that might be useful. Alt-Z allows you to switch in between X-ray mode and solid shading mode. And if you want to select an entire edge, instead of selecting everything, you can highlight an edge and Alt-click on that entire edge. And what Blender will do is will automatically select the entire loop for you. That way it'll save you a lot of time. So now that we have lined up this edge to the front reference image, a problem we've encountered right now is that there's not enough edges for us to play with. So this face kind of looks awkward. So what we want to do is to have another edge loop in here to make the body of the elephant more rounded. So we can just use Control R to add an edge loop on the top and bottom like that. And then just move them so that they sort of fit the outline of the front view. Kind of like that. And you can always go back and change any previous loops if it doesn't look right. There we go. Let's also bring this up. Just move it around. Okay. Cool. So now we've got the basic body proportions aligned. One thing you'll realize is that the head proportion is not at all aligned to the actual size of the head of the elephant. So what we want to do is just shrink this head down. Let's see, the front view says the head is right about that big. So what we want to do is select all the faces that are the head and go to front view, X-ray mode, and just shrink it down. Like that. Ooh. Okay, so one thing to realize is that if you shrink it down in all directions, then the head will be misaligned with the side view. So in this case, all we want to do is just shrink the head in the Y direction to make the head appear smaller, kind of like that. And then we also obviously want to make the head shaped like a head. So we can also keep scaling down the neck, but we can add a couple more edge loops here to make the head more rounded. add another edge loop here. Okay. That kind of looks right. In the beginning stages of modeling, the elephant or object will always kind of look off. But if given enough time and tuning, it will look better. So now that we have the elephant's kind of the basic shape of its head, we kind of just want to keep on working on the elephant's features. So let's work on let's extrude the nose. E to extrude and scale the nose down, the trunk down, so that it matches the side profile of the reference image. Really, the only tools for basic modeling you'll ever need is loop cut, the mirror modifier, and then just basically transforming the shape into the shape you want. Bring it down the Y direction. This one also in the Y direction. Check the front view. Okay. So one thing, if we check with the front view right now, what we'll see is that the head position is a bit too low. So what we can do, what we can do is either select the entire head and just move it up. Sometimes the side and the front reference images won't match up perfectly. In that case, you will either have to move the reference image a little bit, like for example, move this one down, or you'll have to actually scale up the head in the Z direction, and just try your best to match it up. Now, if you see here, you can see that the face is still way too wide. So what we'll have to do is keep on shrinking the face down. It's a bit of a tedious process. And I admit it can get quite boring sometimes. But the end result is, in my opinion, very much worth it. Let's also scale this one down a little bit. It's quite a slow and even monotonous process, but eventually the elephant will start looking like what you want it to look. Let me just move the body outwards a little bit. Okay. Now we can kind of start to see that it looks like an elephant now. Let me just move this down a little bit. You can also see that the trunk at the top is wider than the trunk at the bottom. So let me just scale this up, and scale the bottom down a little. Let's get rid of this reference image. That kind of looks like an elephant. Okay. Let me just also okay.
Can you hear me?
We can now work on the legs of the elephant. So the legs of the elephant, the most obvious way to extrude would be to extrude from this face right here. But the problem with that is, let's see, if you extrude it, it's then connected to the other side, which is something we don't want. We obviously don't want the elephant's legs to be glued to each other. So one way to solve this is if we add an edge loop around the bottom of the elephant like this. And now let's say if we extrude these two faces of the elephant, now that they're separate from each other, we can use the same process. Go into X-ray mode and just align the faces you extrude up with the reference images. Scale, extrude. Okay. This might happen sometimes if you align it to one side of the one reference image, it might mess up. And if you look at it from another view, you'll just have to go back and try to fix it. So select an edge loop, rotate it and bring it back. Select another edge loop, bring it back, and the last one, select the face here and bring it back. Let's also scale this up a little bit. One cool trick is that if you want to flatten the two faces in the vertical direction, what you can do is hit scale Z, then that's scaling it in the Z direction, and then if you hit scale Z and 0, that will flatten the planes out. So now if you look at it, it's completely flat, and that will serve as the foot for the elephant. Let's go back to edge mode and just keep trying to align these edges to the reference image, scaling them up, moving them around. Ooh. Okay. So now if you go back to this view, you can see that the foot is now too wide, so we'll have to scale that down again. Okay, cool. There we go. Basically this entire process is just trying to match up what you have with what the reference image contains. So if you look closely over here, the legs perfectly match up, but the body proportions is still kind of thin. So what we want to do is just to move the edges close to the leg outwards a little bit, especially these edges, move them outwards like that. So now that the reference image and our mesh match up more, and it's starting to look a lot nicer. Now you might wonder, how do you know which edges to move and where to move it? I think to answer this question is more of a matter of experience. The more you try to practice this modeling process, the more you'll get used to it. And eventually with time, you'll be able to model things with reference image in a snap. So let's now try to extrude the front legs. We can select these two faces here and use the same process we did with the back legs. In X-ray mode, scale it down, rotate it, move it so that it matches up. Scale, move, extrude, move, and scale. Extrude, move, and scale. Okay. Now that is way too thin for the front leg of an elephant. So we'll have to scale it up in this case the Y direction as well. Scale Y, up, scale, scale. Oh. scale Y direction. I might have been accidentally scaling it in the X direction as well. Okay, this looks okay. Let's also bring these two edges out, like there, and these two as well, right there, like that. Now if we hide this reference image, you can kind of see how we have the shape of an elephant. Let me just hide this real quick. One thing that we also want to keep in mind is, since we extruded the two legs, like the way we did, we might encounter some sharp edges where the leg goes into the body. One way to fix that is just to move that down in the Z direction a little bit. Not only does that increases the width of the leg, but it also makes it look a lot smoother. Same with the back leg, move that down a little bit. Let's also just move this edge down. Okay, cool. Now, another obvious thing we need to work on is the tail. The tail is just a similar process. Selecting a couple of faces and then extrude. In this case, once you've extruded out these two faces that way, we can now select the bottom face to extrude downwards, because otherwise we would have to rotate these two faces 90 degrees so that it faces downwards, and that's a lot of work. And I'm not a big fan of a lot of works. So I'm just going to select the bottom face and extrude, scale it down, extrude, move, scale it down, extrude, move, scale it down, and extrude, move, and scale. Ooh. What happened there? Okay, so I think what happened there is that as we moved it down, because the faces were slanted inwards, when we moved it down, and scaled it down, they moved into each other, which is why they became so tiny. But you can just scale them up in the Y direction or manually move them apart with the vertices, and like that. Okay, let's also smooth the outline of the elephant out a little bit so it's not all blocky. Like that. And let's just move these two edges outwards a little bit, like that. Yep, perfect. Oh. Now you can see how we have pretty much a pretty nice looking elephant. If you hide the reference image, you can see how kind of the head pokes out a little bit too much. So we can move these downwards. This entire process is just about looking at the model, seeing what doesn't match up with your reference image, and then adjusting the vertices and the edges accordingly so that they do match up. Now, one last thing we're missing is the ear for the elephant, the ears. So what we can do is go to the elephant object edit mode, look at where the ear is. So it kind of looks like the ear is coming out from these two faces. So what we can do is to select these two faces and then extrude it. Now instead of bringing it out, we're going to want to scale it down so it's thinner. Scale down the X direction, scale down the Z direction. Actually, let's just scale it down like this. So that it looks thinner and it kind of matches up more with the reference image. And let's just extrude it outwards. Let's see. From the front view, you can see that the ear goes up to this part. So let's also bring where we extruded it out to that. And we can select the bottom face Move it out and extrude. Move it, scale, extrude again. Okay. This entire process is just about refining the mesh. If something doesn't look right, then it's probably not right. So you just want to move it to another place so that it looks better. And in this case, you can see that we're missing some, the ear doesn't go, isn't where we wanted it to be. So let's move it back. Okay, in this case, since the ear intersects with the body, which is obviously not how elephants ears work in real life, you want to rotate it around so that it doesn't intersect anymore. And another thing we want to do is to add some edge loops here, not only to make it smoother, but it also gives us some more finer control. Okay. The ears goes here. These two vertices will go down. Oh, what did I do? Okay, I accidentally deleted the edges over here. So let me just undo that. Edge loops. And then bring them where they are in the reference image. Here, these two. These two are here, and then finally these two vertices are down here. Okay, that kind of looks weird. Let's see. Let me move this entire ear outwards a little bit. And we can also move the body of the elephant in. Okay, now another problem we see here is how the ear of the elephant is very thick at the moment. Just bring that down. Okay. We see that even though we kind of matched up the shape, how the elephant's ears still kind of look a bit awkward. Number one is because if something look awkward, it's probably not properly lined up to the reference image. So just line them up to make sure that they're lined up to all two sides, or sometimes even three sides of the reference image. And if after changing the views and it still looks awkward, then in this case, the elephant's ears actually cave inwards instead of where we have it, which is caving outwards. That's partially one of the reasons why it might look weird right now. So what we can do is select the vertices of the ear and move them back. Let's just select this side, move them back. Okay. Now let's see what we have. That looks a lot better. One thing that I do see is how this edge right here is very sharp and unnatural. So we can either bring this edge closer like that, or we can just bring this down, this inner edge down, like so. Now we have 3 edges closer to each other, and it looks a lot smoother. Okay, cool. So let's see. Now we're pretty much good to go with this elephant. One thing I would change is, see how the feet are kind of blocky at the moment. One reason is because if we add another edge loop here, we can bring this face more forward, and similarly the back ones backwards to round it out. Like that. We can also do the same to the back legs. Add an edge loop. Select these couple of edges, bringing out in the y direction. Select these couple of edges, bring it forward. Select these edges, move it sideways, and finally selecting these 2 edges and bring them backwards. So now we've made the legs a lot smoother. The same thing can be done with to the trunk. Let's move this edge back, space them out, space the edges out a little bit. Like that. Okay, this looks a lot better. So in this case, we're pretty much good to go for the basic elephant. If you want to add more detail, so if you look at the reference image, you can see that the elephant is not perfectly symmetrical. And to make that, you'll have to apply the mirror modifier, and that basically finalizes the mesh so that it's one object now, instead of one object and duplicated in half. So now you can go to edit mode and see you can make changes to both sides independently without affecting the other side, because we've applied the mirror modifier. After applying the mirror modifier, you can select this leg of the elephant and let's move it inwards a little bit and backwards. You can make changes to the ear, to the legs, to the tail, to the head to make it more asymmetrical, and that might also make it look better as well. I'm not going to do that for now because I want to show you another way to make this elephant look not as blocky, because right now you can see the distinct edges and faces that form squares. It's kind of uniform and doesn't look as good. One way to randomize the face a little bit that I came up with is use a couple of modifiers. So this subdivision surface modifier pretty much divides the cube into 4 different squares. So to demonstrate this, you can see a plane, and if I go into edit mode, right click and click subdivide, you can see how it's adding like a cross inside a square, and it's dividing it up into smaller squares. And that's pretty much what the subdivision surface modifier is doing. It takes a square and it divides it into little smaller squares and smooths it out. And then the more levels you do, the more squares it adds, and the smoother it becomes. So now we've given it some more squares. What we want to add is another decimate modifier. And so if you bring this ratio down, you can see how it's merging all of the vertices generated up here. And now we're brought it down. You can see how the faces look a lot more randomized and and triangular. It doesn't look as uniform as before. I prefer it this way, this look, because it kind of just look a little nicer to me. You can also bring this ratio down a little more, like that. Yeah. But if you don't like this look, one thing you can always do is just get rid of the modifiers, and you'll be back at where you started. So that's pretty much it. How to model a basic elephant. This process can be applied to any object that you're trying to model, as long as you can find a good reference image of it. You can always set up your workspace to have a front view reference and a side reference. Start with a cube. Have the extrude the cube so that it matches with the outline of the side view. Add edge loops, extrude, and extrude different faces so that it matches up with both the front view and the side view. If something doesn't look right, then it's either not line up with one of the reference images, or it's simply that you might have to make some little changes to the different vertices. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys want the file of the elephant as an OBJ or an STL, so you can import it into your scene and check it out yourself, I can put that in the chat as well. But
be great.
Did you guys have any questions?
Yeah. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Because last time I tried, I don't know why it didn't work. My audio. Anyways, is there like an X-Acto knife tool, like for example, to define certain edges more? So let's say, for example, I want it to be smooth, but at the same time, I want to define certain edges to be more, it's in a way to like to create contrast. Essentially, I'm just trying to say that I want to create more sharp edges at certain places, though, instead of keeping it all smooth and or randomized. I understand that you like that, but it's kind of like, I don't know.
X-Acto
Do
knife? Yeah. Good.
you know where I'm getting at?
Uh, I think I get what you mean. For the knife tool, there is a knife tool.
Okay.
There's a K. You can drag it out and create vertices where you like, and then you can like say that I do that, hit an enter, and that's created an edge where I drew the knife. Um, is that what you're trying to ask?
Um, it's mostly like when you put on the filters for the texture and you make it smooth and like randomized.
Uh-huh.
You could see that some of the edges are very sharp and refined, but it also keeps it smooth. So it's like a 50-50.
Uh-huh.
So if I were to make it completely smooth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would still want to sharpen certain edges to my liking.
Oh, okay. I get it. So how the subdivision surface modifier works is that it takes the distance between the two edges and it smooths it based off of that. A better way to demonstrate it is with a cylinder. So if I apply the subdivision surface to it, since the top and bottom edge are really far apart, it kind of takes the average in between the two and smoothes it. But
Yeah.
if I add an edge loop at the middle and bring it to the top, you can kind of see how that edge is becoming more defined. And then the closer I bring it to the top and the more edges I add, the more defined it will be.
Okay. Okay.
So
Gotcha.
that's usually how I try to counter the subdivision modifier. It's just to add more edges and make them closer to each other.
Right, right.
Hmm.
Aren't there like layers in you're using Blender, right?
Yeah.
There's gotta be layers, right? That you can put different shapes into different layers. So then maybe you can focus on one shape at one at a time instead of having all of them in one layer. That's a thing, right?
You can organize them into different collections.
Okay.
Um, it's kind of like layers, where you can
Yeah.
have like one box containing different objects, and then you can um, do modifying on collection levels. But for modeling in general, there's not really a layer. It's just you make the changes and then make the changes to the mesh itself.
Okay. Ouch. It's gonna be tough.
Um,
Uh,
the modifiers are kind of like layers. You can stack them. Um, so and they're non-destructive as well. What that means is that if you add like an array modifier, you can always get rid of it and always be back to where you started.
right, right. Is there like a what's that one tool called? It's like a you can hide the layer. Can you hide collections or
Yeah,
modifiers or anything?
yeah.
Yeah?
So
Okay.
say that we have a subdivision surface modifier like this. You can hide it in the viewport by clicking this little display icon, and that will hide it. Um,
Okay, cool.
and then if you want to hide individual objects, you can hit the eye icon on the top right, and that will hide
Mhm.
it from the scene.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to waste your time any longer. I have one last question.
No worries.
Uh, I forgot what it is. Okay. Is using a sphere harder than using a cube? Because you started with a sphere, I mean, cube, sorry.
That's
But,
actually a good question. For spheres, let me see. If I add a sphere, in
no.
some ways it could be easier, but sometimes it's just I feel like it's really up to personal preference. I've gotten used to working with cubes from the beginning.
Right, right.
I
Okay.
guess spheres will work. That's actually a good point. I've actually never tried starting with a sphere.
Well, I think you did pretty well with the cube itself. I was just thinking, like, for character modeling,
Mm-hmm.
especially.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some round edges and stuff, and I feel like starting off with a sphere or an oval. Wait, what the hell am I talking about? A sphere would be probably easier. Um,
Right.
but yeah.
Um.
Have you like character modeling? I remember I first time I joined here, you did like a little character. It was like a
Oh yeah.
pig or something.
Yeah.
It was mostly oops. It
That.
was mostly
Sorry.
yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay.
For that one, I just used the cube as the head, and
Yeah,
everything was
yeah,
bulky, so I didn't use spheres.
yeah. Have you tried doing anything more like with soft edges? Anything like that?
Soft edges, I
I
have.
mean, oh, look, it's the elephant, but
Usually, what
uh,
I do is I just add the subdivision surface, and if that's not smooth enough, there's another smooth modifier that smooths it even further.
oh my gosh.
So that's if I
Okay,
want to do something smooth, that's usually what I do.
okay, okay. Gotcha. All
Hmm.
right. Thank you for this. I can't believe you do this every single week on Mondays at 7 p.m. Um, and I'm just so surprised you do this on Mondays at 7 p.m. because I have no energies on Mondays, especially when we had that fire drill today. That
Oh
was
yeah.
horrible. Um, so thank you. Thank you a lot.
Thank you for
Um,
coming.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you have a great teaching style. I like it a lot. Um, you know how to keep on talking even though no one's talking.
Uh,
Okay. Goodbye. Have a wonderful night.
you too.
Yeah. See you on Friday, I think.
We don't have
Right?
school on Friday.
We don't?
Yeah,
Oh
we
my
have a
God.
4-day weekend.
Huzzah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, have a wonderful night. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Oh my God. Am I still on? I need to get off. How do I get off, dude? No.